impulse killings to madness-fueled violence. Calculated acts of cruelty, torture, and brutality. Forensics now reveals those among us who are most evil. Delusional killers, fractured minds on the edge of the real and the imagined. In Santa Cruz, California, Herbert Mullen thinks he can prevent earthquakes with murder. His rampage claims the lives of 13 people. Mother of two, Diana Dial, fears a group of Nazi assassins in Texas. She kills one of her perceived attackers. In Missouri, Eric Beischlein's drug-addled mind believes someone is after him. His total number of victims is unknown. These killers are united by a common force: delusions, deeply held false beliefs. Fueled by distorted perceptions, these delusions result in unexpected and evil acts. But not all evil acts are equal. What separates these killers and the delusions that propel them? Now there is a scale with 22 levels that decodes a killer's motive, method, and mind. The more heinous the crime, and the more rational the perpetrator, the higher the criminal is placed on the scale.
My scale helps me navigate the dark world of violent crime.
Creator of this scale, Dr. Michael Stone, forensic psychiatrist, Columbia University. Dr. Stone asks probing questions in search of these killers' delusional core.
What are the personality characteristics?
How many of them have predisposition to mental illness?
The presence of schizophrenia raises the likelihood of violent acts.
Delusional killers occupy a range on Dr. Stone's scale. Their position is determined by the source and intensity of their delusion. The scale distinguishes between killers whose minds are overtaken by madness and those who create delusions through their actions. To place each killer on his scale, Dr. Stone must examine the evolution of their delusional beliefs. Beginning with the case of Herbert Mullen.
We haven't had anything like this in Santa Cruz County before, and I hope to God we never have anything like this again.
1973. 4 teenage campers are found dead, shot execution style.
I think people are definitely a little uptight. They don't know exactly what we have running loose around here.
They are a part of a string of 13 murders. The victims include a hitchhiker, a priest, and a mother and her children. The trail eventually leads investigators to an unlikely suspect. Herbert Mullen, a former honor student and varsity athlete, voted by his classmates most likely to succeed.
On the surface, the crimes of Herbert Mullen appear disorganized and unrelated. But to him, they made complete sense.
Mullen believes he is receiving telepathic messages, and that by killing, he is saving thousands of lives. How does a promising young man transform into a vicious, delusional killer? To answer this question, Dr. Stone delves into Herbert Mullen's past. April 18, 1947. Herbert Mullen is born into a middle-class family outside of San Francisco, California. His father, a World War II veteran, is stern but loving. Mullen is a religious child and serves as an altar boy. He is popular and smart and stars on the varsity football team. He plans to become an engineer. Then, tragedy strikes. Mullen's best friend dies in a car accident. He builds a shrine to his friend and develops an obsession with reincarnation.
The death of his best friend is the defining moment in Mullen's life. It is not uncommon for the stress of a traumatic event to aggravate a predisposition to mental illness and bring about symptoms that have yet to be named. This appears to be the case with Herbert Mullen. From this point forward, his life begins to unravel.
1968. Mullen drops out of college and starts experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs. He joins the Vietnam protest movement and registers as a conscientious objector, disappointing his war hero father. Mullen's family begins to notice odd behavior. While eating dinner, he mimics the actions of his brother-in-law, mirroring his every move. Mullen commits himself to a mental institution and is diagnosed with schizophrenia. Doctors note his prognosis as poor.
Before we explore the delusional descent and the crimes of Herbert Mullen, we must understand schizophrenia, the mysterious illness that is beginning to transform his mind.
A mental illness that affects 1% of the population, schizophrenia is a devastating disorder that physically attacks the brain and robs individuals of the core features that make us human.
In the case of Herbert Mullen, schizophrenia turns a talented mind into a serial killer.
What is schizophrenia? How does it impact the brain? Science now allows us to see.
One of the mysteries is what is happening in the brain as schizophrenia strikes.
Dr. Paul Thompson is a neurologist at UCLA's Lab of Neuroimaging.
One of the things we're interested in is, can we scan people with schizophrenia and try and understand what's happening in the brain as they develop delusions and psychosis and hallucinations.
Thompson scans the brains of 12 schizophrenic patients with MRI 3 times over a 5-year period. By combining patient scans, Dr. Thompson hopes to create a time-lapse movie that provides the first glimpse of schizophrenia's impact on a living brain. Patients are first scanned after they are diagnosed.
This is when a patient first develops signs of hearing voices, having sensations that are irrational.
The inability to understand whether sounds are real or whether they're in their head.
As he examines the data, Thompson makes a remarkable discovery.
When we began, we thought maybe the changes were psychological. What we actually saw was
The brain has this dynamic wave of tissue loss. So the patient first has signs of hallucinations and delusions. They're actually rapidly losing brain tissue.
In the first year of the disease, patients lose 5% of their brain tissue. 2 years later, patients are scanned again. The corresponding images reveal a terrifying progression.
The biggest surprise is that although the damage starts at the back of the brain, there's this massive avalanche of brain tissue loss that ends up at the front of the brain.
So one of the things that you see here in red colors, slow loss of gray matter that proceeds forward like a forest fire.
The final scans reveal, after 5 years, the damage has spread to a crucial region of the brain, the frontal lobes.
And this is the area that makes sense of all the perceptions that you have. So as the wave of loss moves forward, you'll begin to have thoughts unraveling, and you may begin to have delusions about who you are, or you may not understand what's going on in the world at all. 5 years into the illness, you end up with about a 25% deficit, about a quarter of the brain tissue being lost in schizophrenia. These brain cells can never be replaced.
Dr. Thompson's findings offer critical insight into the nature of schizophrenia. It physically attacks the brain, twists perceptions, and gives birth to delusional thought. For Herbert Mullen, the diagnosis of schizophrenia marks the beginning of a delusional descent that compels him to do the unthinkable. Dr. Michael Stone has uncovered one factor he believes contributed to the brutal crimes of delusional killer Herbert Mullen: schizophrenia. A devastating mental illness, schizophrenia destroys brain tissue and produces irrational thoughts.
Herbert Mullen's delusional descent mirrors the progression of schizophrenia. Once he is diagnosed, his mind becomes increasingly fractured. He isolates himself from his family and begins to entertain thoughts of horrific evil.
1971. Mullen begins hearing voices and grows suspicious of his anti-war friends. He believes they have brainwashed him into becoming a conscientious objector. Mullen adopts a clean-cut appearance and takes up boxing, training for hours at a time. He is convinced that he is receiving telepathic communications that give him access to secret knowledge.
Like many schizophrenics, Mullen has trouble making sense of the world around him. He takes a string of seemingly unrelated facts and ascribes to them great meaning. As the disease progresses, he begins to form a complex and deadly delusion.
Mullen obsessively researches the life of Albert Einstein and makes what he thinks is a shocking discovery. Einstein's death and the anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake fall on the same date. Mullen's birthday. Earthquakes become his new obsession. He studies seismography and global death rates. The once promising mind sees a twisted connection. He believes he can prevent future earthquakes with a simple act: murder. He picks up a hitchhiker and stabs her to death with a hunting knife, then drags the body to the woods and dissects it. His savagery escalates. Mullen enters a Catholic church on All Souls Day and hears the voice of his father commanding him to kill. He approaches the confessional and stabs and kills the priest inside. No one suspects Mullen of the murders.
Schizophrenics experience intense episodes of distorted reality. Mullen's initial murders occur at the height of such an episode. Soon after, he stabilizes and experiences great conflict. He is remorseful for the murders, but thinks he must continue to kill in order to prevent earthquakes.
Mullen sees a solution. If he joins the fight in Vietnam, he can continue to kill and avert future earthquakes. Like his father, he enlists in the Marines, but is rejected for previous drug arrests. Mullen is devastated. He blames the high school friend who sold him drugs. Mullen shoots and brutally stabs the friend and his wife. The voices persist. Mullen hears victims calling to him, asking to be killed. He takes 7 more lives. February 13, 1973. As a man waters his lawn, Mullen shoots him with a rifle, killing him. He is arrested shortly after, 1 year after his murder spree began and 13 victims later.
Mullen's delusion was all-encompassing. He folded all of the information he came across into a complex and confounding belief system. There is one factor, however, that appears to have pushed Mullen over the edge. Command hallucinations, voices that demand a specific action. Mullen heard the voice of his father ordering him to kill.
In Santa Cruz, California, 25-year-old Herbert Mullen was charged with the fatal shootings of 6 persons in the past 3 weeks.
After an unsuccessful insanity defense, Mullen is found guilty of 10 counts of murder and is serving a life sentence. Dr. Stone considers the delusion, the voices, and the crimes of Herbert Mullen before placing him on his scale of evil.
Killers of sound mind who have committed crimes of equal brutality belong at level 16 on my scale of evil, multiple vicious acts. I consider Mullen's delusion and command hallucinations, however, a mitigating factor. They cloud his mind and remove some degree of responsibility for his actions. I place him therefore at level 13, psychotic delusional killers.
Voices, or auditory hallucinations, are one of the most common symptoms of schizophrenia. They can play a powerful and menacing role, shaping perceptions, and in extreme cases, demanding action. Where do these voices come from?
It's a fascinating symptom, and it's a very troubling illness.
Dr. Judy Ford is a neurologist at Yale University.
How is it that you can hear something that isn't there, that can be so real and so compelling, even though all evidence to the contrary is in front of you, and still you believe that you are hearing voices?
Dr. Ford is studying the brains of 24 schizophrenic patients and 25 healthy controls in search of the cause of auditory hallucinations. If she is correct, the brains of schizophrenics will show a breakdown in a basic sensory system. To test this theory, Dr. Ford observes subjects' brain activity while they speak. Subjects are instructed to utter a simple phrase into a microphone. The EEG records their brain waves. The results are intriguing.
Right before a healthy control speaks, we see this burst of neural activity. 150 milliseconds before you talk, the brain says, okay, let's go.
Dr. Ford sees something different in the brains of schizophrenics. They lack this burst of neural activity. As she analyzes the data, Dr. Ford finds a link between this activity and auditory hallucinations.
She found that those that have the less neural synchrony before they speak are the ones who are more likely to have severe auditory hallucinations.
Dr. Ford believes this lack of activity represents a breakdown in a fundamental brain system.
We think that this burst of neural activity prepares the brain for what it's about to experience. It's a way of saying you are going to hear your own voice, and it tells you it's coming from myself. It didn't come from the outside.
This broken system may cause schizophrenics to interpret their inner experiences as voices coming from the outside.
What I think is probably happening is that it's these kind of old memories or experiences, things just kind of like bubbling up. And what's different between you and somebody with schizophrenia who has auditory hallucinations is that you know it's coming from you, and they don't know that it's coming from them.
Herbert Mullen's voices propel his twisted delusional beliefs and compel him to commit savage acts. The voices in Ed Gein's head convince him that he can raise the dead. Dr. Michael Stone is using his scale of evil to evaluate delusional killers. One factor that led to the crimes of Herbert Mullen is auditory hallucinations, or voices. However, Mullen is not the only killer tormented by voices. Ed Gein hears the voice of his dead mother and believes he can bring her back to life. He scours obituaries and begins harvesting graves for body parts. Gein decorates his home with human remains and makes clothing with corpses' skin. His depravity escalates to murder. Gein kills 2 women. The victims, he claims, resemble his dead mother. Because he is considered mad at the time of his crimes, Dr. Stone places Gein at level 13 on his scale of evil. Richard Chase, the Sacramento vampire, hears a voice that tells him he is dying. The 27-year-old believes he must drink blood to remain among the living. He kills and eats small animals, then turns to humans. Chase shoots and kills a pregnant woman and another woman and her son, and drinks their blood. Due to the savagery of his crimes, Dr. Stone places Chase above Gein at level 17. Gary Heidnik hears what he believes is the voice of God. It instructs him to start a church, and he installs himself as bishop. Heidnik's goal for his congregation? To repopulate the earth with his children. He kidnaps women and holds them captive in his basement, then rapes and tortures them for days. When they fail to become pregnant, he kills them. The organization of Heidnik's crimes and the torture he subjects his victims to set him apart from other delusional killers. Dr. Stone places him at the highest level of his scale, level 22. But the most shocking delusional killers are not always the most evil.
Williamson County 911, what is your emergency?
Hi, this is Diana Dial. We'd like you to come over to 8503 Columbia Falls.
Well, what's going on?
Yeah, somebody's dead.
Austin, Texas, 1997. Mother of 2, Diana Dial phones the police.
Okay, do you think this is of natural causes?
No.
Okay, don't touch anything?
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Moments before, Dial shot and killed her roommate, Jack Ferris. As he lies in a pool of blood on the floor, Dial prepares a cup of coffee and calmly waits for police to arrive. How does a delusion turn a loving mother into a remorseless killer? To answer this question, Dr. Stone must examine Diana Dial's past. Los Angeles, 1950. Diana is an ideal child, intelligent and well-behaved. She is a dedicated Girl Scout and has a passion for animals. She marries her longtime sweetheart, George Gallo, and gives birth to a son. 1979. Tragedy strikes. Gallo suffers a miscarriage, and her mind begins to unravel.
Traumatic experiences can bring about a temporary break from reality, or a psychosis. The intense pain Gallo experiences may have brought about a psychotic episode that develops into a mental illness.
Gallo's husband notices a change. She is anxious and irrational. She fears her life is in danger. She believes she is being pursued by Nazis. Briefly hospitalized, she is later diagnosed with schizophrenia. Gallo is convinced that she is not mentally ill and stops taking her medication. Fearing for her children's safety, Gallo forces her boys to wear charm bracelets to ward off the Nazi assassins. When her husband finds out, he files for divorce, and Gallo moves out on her own. When we return, Dr. Stone explores the delusional mind of Diana Gallo. Dr. Michael Stone is investigating the case of delusional killer Diana Gallo. Gallo thinks that she is being pursued by a group of Nazis. When she refuses psychiatric treatment, her husband leaves her.
Gallo's refusal to acknowledge her mental illness and accept treatment leads to the loss of the very thing she was trying to protect, her family. Without medication and a support system, her delusions broaden in scope and intensify.
Gallo believes she is working with the CIA to track her pursuers. To conceal her identity, she changes her name to Diana Dial. She identifies her chief persecutor as Cheryl Thompson, an imaginary woman Dial believes is working under the protection of the White House. Dial sees connections at every turn. Her roommate, a 52-year-old businessman named Jack Ferris, is also a member of the organization pursuing her. Dial compulsively writes letters to anyone she thinks can help. Friends and family, congressmen and senators, and the FBI. Sometimes writing up to 20 letters a day.
You denied my children their own mother, and that's what I hold you responsible for. They are capable of killing me off and killing everything that Cheryl wants to be. But all they'll do is destroy. They think killing is fun, a game. He wants to wipe Cheryl Thompson and Dave were kidnapping faces of mass murderers.
Dial displays symptoms of hypergraphia, the compulsive need to write. She channels her delusions into her writing. When no one responds to her cries for help, her delusions reach new heights.
Dial believes her roommate, Jack Ferris, has secretly poisoned her, and she is slowly dying. Ferris is unaware of her suspicions. Dial never voices her concern. She even bakes him cookies. But inside, her mind is racing. Fearing that he will target her children, Dial decides she must stop Ferris before he kills again. As he reads his morning newspaper, Dial walks into the kitchen, points a gun at his chest, and fires. When police arrive, the 47-year-old mother admits to the murder. She writes a cryptic, rambling 13-page confession that reveals the depths of her delusion.
My children are my consideration. The members of this group have kept me away from my children all along. The best thing I could do for them was eliminate one of the threats to them, and that's what I did.
A jury finds Dial guilty of murder. She is serving a 60-year sentence.
There is still much we do not know about the nature of Diana Dial's delusion. While at one point she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, it is unclear to me whether Miss Dial is truly afflicted with that disease.
To place her on his scale of evil, Dr. Stone travels to Texas to meet Diana Dial face to face. As he prepares for the interview, Dr. Stone considers the challenge of unraveling Dial's delusional mind.
I have to be a little on guard because her experiences with psychiatrists have not been pleasant for her in the past. She stoutly denies that she is mentally ill.
When we return, Dr. Stone probes the depths of Diana Dial's mind.
He was setting up his own death. He wanted me to shoot him.
Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Stone is on a journey to understand the minds of delusional killers. It has brought him to Texas to interview Diana Dial. Dial believes she was being pursued by a group of assassins led by a woman named Cheryl Thompson. In 1997, Dial became convinced her roommate, Jack Ferris, was a member of this organization. He had no history of criminal involvement. Dial shot and killed him. Dr. Stone begins the interview by asking about the murder.
Jack had poisoned me. He had fed me a poison on Hitler's birthday, April 20th. April 20th, 1997. He had just told me that he had murdered my grandmother January 10th, 1997. Okay. And I started experiencing the same symptoms.
Specifically?
Well, you start seeing black floaty things in your eyes, and I started getting these tremendous headaches. I don't have the same control over my body and my senses that I used to.
Dial's beliefs are intense. There is no medical indication that she was actually poisoned. She believes, however, that she was, and her mind has created symptoms to reinforce that belief. The key to understanding this delusional system may lie in her past. So when did the problem start?
The problem started when I set a world record in high school, and then I went to UCLA, and somebody asked me to join the swim team there, and I said, okay. And I received a phone call, a death threat. We're going to blow up you and everybody on your team if you join that swim team. Okay, that was the first real serious problem.
Records do not substantiate Dial's claim to hold a world record in swimming. This points to the grandiose nature of her delusion. She feels that she's being targeted for her positive attributes and achievements. Her delusion appears to expand in early adulthood after she marries George Gallo and has a son. And then you had the first son in '81, I believe.
Yeah. Something happened before that.
What was that?
George came home from work one day and he said his friend is going to Nevada gambling and they want to know if we'll go with him. So we went with him, and I went into the casino and won the casino from a man named Will Harvey. That's the guy I ended up shooting, but he was using the name Jack Ferris here in Texas.
And you're sure it was the same person?
I'm positive it's the same person.
The strength of Dial's delusion is remarkable. Her mind consistently manufactures implausible stories that she believes illuminate the complex plot against her.
Well, the guy that I shot said he had been paid to come after me. It was a contract. He was offered $1 billion to spend his life poisoning people that Cheryl Thompson and her dad didn't like.
He told you that? Or?
Yes, he told me that.
Cheryl Thompson does not exist. She is a creation of Dial's delusional mind. Dial sees herself as part of a larger political conspiracy orchestrated by this imaginary nemesis.
Jack said that's who he worked for and that's who the problems were with. So he said he had blown up the federal building in Oklahoma City and tried to frame McVeigh and Nichols.
So you think they got it wrong in Oklahoma?
Well, I'm just telling you what this man told me. Okay. He said he went up there and blew up the federal building and tried to make it look like Timothy McVeigh did it. Okay.
You're pretty solid on that, or
that's what I was told.
Yeah, I know you were told that, but do you have even a smidgen of a doubt that that's true?
No doubt whatsoever.
Tell me, do you think that it was a little careless of Jack to vouchsafe to you that he was responsible for the Murrah building?
No, because he was setting up his own death. He wanted me to shoot him. He was trying to get rid of me.
I was struck by the congenial madness of Diana Dial. It is rare to see a delusion as pervasive as hers. Dial does not display the disjointed speech that is the hallmark of schizophrenia. I believe she suffers from delusional disorder, a rare condition that shares schizophrenia's fixed, irrational beliefs. Dial truly feared for her life and felt that she had no other choice but to kill her roommate. Due to the severe nature of these delusional beliefs, I place her at level 7 on my scale of evil.
When placing killers on his scale of evil, Dr. Stone considers mental illness a mitigating factor. It paralyzes the mind and strikes without warning. But the most evil delusional killers, like Eric Beischlein, choose madness. Dr. Michael Stone has created a scale that measures human evil. Distorted perceptions and twisted thoughts that strike without warning. These are the symptoms that Dr. Stone observes when examining delusional killers. But the most evil delusional killers go in search of madness. They are scheming, predatory killers, like Eric Beischlein. 1993. Insurance salesman Eric Beischlein is paranoid. He believes he is being followed. His mind is slipping. People see him arguing with a flagpole. This is the twisted world of Eric Beischlein before he turns to murder.
Beischlein displays the behavior of many delusional killers, but the cause of his behavior is just one of the things that sets him apart.
1975, Hobart, Indiana. Eric Beischlein is a charming, active child. But there is something else. He is restless, mischievous. Beischlein is suspended from junior high for smoking marijuana. He moves on to cocaine and becomes addicted, frequently blacking out. Family members notice disturbing behavior, a quick temper, and a tendency to lie.
From an early age, Beischlein shows psychopathic tendencies shared by many killers: glib speech, a disregard for others, and most significantly in his case, charm. His drug abuse only adds fuel to his psychopathic fire.
Beischlein lands a job selling insurance to the elderly and earns a reputation as a smooth talker and a sharp dresser. Flush with cash, his cocaine habit takes over his mind. He becomes paranoid and suspects he's being followed. Beischlein carries a bottle of chloroform, which he later claims is for protection. As his paranoia grows, Beischlein struggles to maintain his habit. He targets his elderly clients, sells them fake insurance policies, and cashes the checks to buy cocaine. He blacks out for hours at a time. Paralyzed by suspicions, Beischlein is convinced his pursuers are monitoring him and that they have planted listening devices in his walls.
Beischlein's delusional thinking appears to be directly related to his drug abuse. Prolonged substance abuse can produce powerful and lasting schizophrenia-like symptoms. As his paranoid thinking escalates, his actions become more vicious.
An elderly woman refuses his sales pitch, and Beischlein forces his way into her home. He subdues her with a chloroform-soaked rag, suffocates her to death, then robs her. He disposes of the body in the Missouri River. Police discovered the victim's purse in Beischlein's car, and he is arrested. Investigators recognize a pattern. This is one in a series of elderly assaults that share an MO. In a drug-fueled haze, Beischlein assaults and robs another elderly victim. He is also suspected in 2 additional deaths. His total number of victims is unknown. At trial, Beischlein's lawyers argue that years of drug abuse caused psychosis, and that this madness should be considered a mitigating factor.
The notion that drug abuse is a mitigating factor in a murder case is preposterous. In my view, it doubles the malice. Beischlein knowingly put himself in an altered state of mind in which he was much more likely to commit a heinous act.
A jury finds him guilty of murder. Beischlein is serving a life sentence. Before placing him on his scale of evil, Dr. Stone considers the mind, the motive, and the crimes of Erich Beischlein. Like Mullen and Dial, Beischlein's mind is clouded by convoluted, delusional thinking. However, Mullen and Dial suffer from mental illness. Beischlein's delusions are drug-induced. He killed an elderly woman and assaulted another, and is suspected in at least 2 additional deaths.
Beischlein's preparation for the murder and the assaults reveal a degree of scheming and premeditation. Because of this, I place him above both Mullen and Dial at level 16, psychopaths committing multiple vicious acts.
Delusional killers. Research now reveals some of the factors that create their distorted worlds.
While there are similarities in how these killers experience the world, the cause of their mental states is what distinguishes them. This in turn determines where they belong on my scale. I consider a killer who is involuntarily struck by mental illness to be less evil than a killer whose distorted reality is self-induced.
Dr. Stone continues to analyze the brutal acts of delusional killers in hopes of understanding and one day preventing their horrific crimes. This is just one step in his journey to understand and ultimately quantify evil.
He's a complete narcissist, and he wasn't going to let another man have her.
She wanted to be with someone that had money. That was her main motivator in life, money.
We know that the last person that she talked to was her mother at 8:30 on the 23rd. The timeline begins there.
We have rules, and the rules require evidence to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Murderous masterminds. Brilliant. Wicked. Conniving.
It wasn't just a happenstance, haphazard murder spree of a year. It was 50 weeks of planned killing.
They are driven by revenge, dogma, and ego.
My name is Chet Bundy, and I'm the defendant in the case, and I'm just here to introduce myself.
Their common trait, high intelligence. What transformed these gifted minds to become some of the most grisly killers? And who is most evil? A scale exists to measure the darkest corners of human behavior. From impulse killings to madness-fueled violence. Calculated acts of cruelty, torture, and brutality. Forensics now reveals those among us who are most evil. Malicious masterminds. They are among the most devious and twisted killers. Their intelligence is their greatest weapon. It enables them to plot elaborate crimes and elude capture. In California, Edmund Kemper is locked up for killing his grandparents. He tricks the system to release him early and then launches into a year-long killing spree. Chicago. 19th century Dr. H.H. Holmes slaughters victims in his hotel and then sells their body parts. To him, murder is thrilling and profitable. 1977. Ted Kaczynski disappears into the woods to plan a drawn-out, deadly attack. He would terrorize the U.S. for nearly 20 years. In each case, the murders are gruesome, vicious, evil. But no two evil acts are the same. Now there is a scale with 22 levels. It decodes a killer's motive, method, and mind. The more heinous the crime, and the more rational the perpetrator, the higher the criminal is placed on the scale. Creator of the scale, renowned forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Stone. Dr. Stone explores these killers' pasts and crimes to understand what motivates them to kill, and uses his scale to navigate the minds of the most heinous killers.
Serial killers in general are cunning. They must strategize, plot, and scheme to execute their plans. But those who most successfully carry out their murders are exceptionally clever and smart. These killers usually occupy the higher levels on the scale of evil.
Among these mastermind killers is Edmund Kemper.
We're talking about a cold-hearted murder, you know, and mayhem and assault and robbery and rape.
Northern California, 1972. The morning before Easter Sunday, Edmund Kemper makes the bed, calmly washes up, and leaves the house. The home is tidy. Still, it seems like an unremarkable day. But for Kemper, it is a momentous day. He just actualized a childhood dream: to kill his mother. After she draws her last breath, he whispers to himself, "Poetic justice." She is one of Kemper's 10 victims.
Kemper is among the most gruesome serial killers. This towering 6'9" man slaughtered, butchered, even devoured his victims. He delighted in killing, and due to his intelligence, his crimes went long unnoticed.
What compelled him to kill his own mother? And how did his intelligence and skillful deceit fuel his killing rampage? To understand the roots of such sadistic violence, Dr. Stone delves into Kemper's past. He uncovers nightmarish details. Kemper is raised in a tumultuous household. His parents separate when he is 4. He and his 2 sisters stay with their mother, who is embittered by the split. She berates young Kemper, locks him in the basement for months at a time to punish him. While in seclusion, Kemper creates fantasies. He imagines killing his mother, her friends, his teacher. The isolation gets to him, stirs hate within him. He takes out his aggressions on his sister's toys, cuts off their heads and limbs. This secret habit foreshadows his future crimes.
His mother is the defining figure in Kemper's childhood. The rage that she feels for her husband is directed onto her son. The oppression Kemper experiences slowly builds to anger within him.
As a teenager, Kemper lives between his mother's and his grandparents' homes. His grandparents make him feel like a burden, unwanted. In a fit of rage, he shoots both grandparents dead. And he is sent to a mental institution for adult prisoners. While there, he masters skills in deception. 1964. Prison experts evaluate Kemper. He scores 136 on IQ tests. Of superior intelligence, one doctor notes. Surrounded by psychopaths, he spends his days learning about their crimes. He also befriends the very psychologists treating him, earning him a job as a research aide, administering psychological tests to other inmates. Kemper memorizes these 22 psychology tests, learns how to manipulate, and eventually outsmart the system. Having mastered the psychology exams, he earns high marks when tested and wins praise from psychologists. 5 years later, he is released early.
Kemper uses his intelligence to trick the authorities. This makes brilliant killers among the most dangerous criminals. They have foresight and the capacity to outsmart not only their victims, but also their captors. To do so, they are extremely calculating and scheming. They carry out their crimes with absolute precision. And when put in an environment that triggers their rage, they are merciless.
When released, Kemper is sent back to his mother.
But I was put right back in the pressure cooker that I was hatched out of. It was a very sick and very depressive and very unhealthy relationship.
His mother continues to taunt Kemper, telling him he's a failure, just like his father. Each time they argue, he storms out of the house and drives aimlessly, passing young female hitchhikers. He begins to pick them up, enjoys their company, and their vulnerability. These encounters reignite his urge to kill. Edmund Kemper. His brilliance impresses doctors, and his superior intelligence helps him to launch a killing spree, including his own flesh and blood. At age 15, he murders his grandparents. After serving 5 years, he is released and goes on a murderous rampage. Santa Cruz, 1972. Kemper drives aimlessly, passing young female hitchhikers. His first victims are 2 female college students. He picks them up and shoots them dead in his car. Kemper takes the bodies home, dismembers their limbs and heads, just as he had done to his sister's dolls. He saves some of the body parts in the refrigerator as trophies, even cannibalizes pieces of them, and discards the rest along the California coast. He eventually slaughters and mutilates a total of 6 young women. Each murder, he later describes, is a fantasy coming to life. Police have no idea who this killer is. To them, Kemper doesn't exist. He is relentless.
It wasn't just a happenstance, haphazard murder spree of a year. It was 50 weeks of planned killing.
With each murder, he became more excited, more empowered, and more charged to kill again, and more savagely each time.
Kemper's rage drives him to kill college girls. But he finally directs his anger towards the source of his rage: his mother. On the day before Easter, he bludgeons and decapitates her in her bedroom. Hours later, He turns himself in to police.
During Kemper's childhood, his mother was an abusive presence. As he got older, he channeled his aggression into murder. Targeting female hitchhikers, in a sense, was like killing his mother over and over again. Ultimately, killing his mother was his form of retribution, closure.
Edmund Kemper is given 7 consecutive life sentences. Considering his crimes, Dr. Stone places him on a scale.
Because of the serial nature of his crimes and the sadistic pleasure Edmund Kemper experienced, I would place him on level 22 of my scale. This is the highest category, a place for torture murderers whose crimes involve butchery and sexual assault. He is undeniably one of the most evil killers still alive.
How could Kemper kill with his bare hands? Is there something fundamentally different about him that makes him a cold-blooded killer? Science is trying to answer that question. And some clues lie in the biology of human empathy. It starts with mirror neurons, brain cells necessary to recognizing and acknowledging human emotions.
What mirror neurons do is to really be the building block of social behavior in our brain.
Marco Iacoboni, a neuroscientist at UCLA, is studying how mirror neurons play a role in learning empathy and understanding violence. His theory? Mirror neurons tell the brain how to read and feel emotions. People without these mirror cells cannot feel empathy. They cannot see pain being felt by another person. To test this hypothesis, he conducts functional MRI scans on subjects as they observe and respond to emotional cues. While in the MRI, the subjects see pictures of facial expressions showing happiness or anger in a pair of goggles. They first are told to merely observe the images. Then they are asked to mimic the emotions. The results are intriguing. The brain scans show that mirror cells travel to 2 parts of the brain to connect an action to a feel. Brain activity starts in the region responsible for muscle movement. The mirror cells instruct the brain to literally mirror the observed action. The cells then travel to the brain's emotional centers and assign an emotion to that action. This is why when normal people see a smile, they have an emotional understanding of happiness. And these are the building blocks of empathy.
When I feel certain emotions, I express those emotions with my own body, with my own face.
Iacoboni was able to validate this theory by testing unlikely subjects, autistic patients, who generally lack empathy.
I want you to point to the face that shows how she's feeling in the picture. Show me angry.
Autistics know how to describe emotions,
Angry. Embarrassed.
but many have difficulty feeling or expressing them.
Show me joy.
Functional MRI scans of the autistic subjects show very little activation of mirror neurons, and the more severe the autism, the less activity in the mirror neuron system. There's no correlation between autism and violence. But Iacoboni believes that a detachment between mirror neurons and the emotional centers of the brain may block feelings of empathy and is a key to explaining violence. He plans to expand his research to studying sociopaths and look for further correlations.
We believe that violent behavior could be triggered by some form of disconnect between mirror neurons and emotional brain centers.
Lack of empathy is a starting point to understanding mastermind killers like Edmund Kemper. Murderers who, despite being intelligent and accomplished, show no regard for their victims. When we continue, Dr. Stone examines other masterminds whose intelligence helps them to commit unspeakable crimes. Wicked masterminds. They are shrewd, clever, and among the most evil serial killers. Their extreme intelligence allows them to outsmart their victims and evade authorities. Like Ted Bundy, one of the most lethal killers in recent history.
My name is Ted Bundy, and I'm the defendant in the case, and I'm just here to introduce myself.
Bundy brutally murders scores of young women across the U.S. in the 1970s. His violent streak begins while he's an honor student at the University of Washington. After a girlfriend dumps him, he seeks revenge on women. He lures them by posing as a police officer, fireman, or businessman. He then rapes, strangles, and finally drowns them. Over 4 years, he kills at least 35 women.
Ted Bundy was an expert imposter because he was extremely attractive and persuasive. He knew how to take advantage of his good looks and charm.
This is also evident during his trial. Bundy serves as his own counsel. He impresses the court, even the judge.
You're a bright young man. If you made a good lawyer, I'd love to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
He is ultimately sentenced to death. Some killers are so clever, so insidious, that they are never found. Like the notorious Zodiac Killer. 1969, San Francisco. A city lives in fear of a murderer calling himself the Zodiac.
He's an absolutely ruthless, completely merciless killer.
He executes 5 people, approaching them in lovers' lanes, gunning them down, or stabbing them to death. He taunts and teases police, leaving clues in letters to the press. Each time, he threatens to strike again. Investigators are baffled, unable to crack a cryptogram that contains 360 symbols and allegedly the killer's identity. He ultimately claims 5 victims over 3 years and is never apprehended. His legacy lives on, and his identity remains unknown.
Though not identified definitively in his lifetime, Arthur Lee Allen, whose IQ was 136, was suspected of being San Francisco's Zodiac Killer. From evidence gathered after his death, his guilt is now a near certainty. His ability to evade capture and kill ruthlessly places him among the most evil masterminds.
There are masterminds who thrive on the mental challenge of executing the perfect crime. Like Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, 2 wealthy college friends of genius intelligence. Chicago, 1924. Bored with their privileged lives, Leopold and Loeb hatch a plan to kidnap and kill an acquaintance for ransom. Money isn't their objective. Rather, their aim